Welcome to another exciting episode. This time, we'll be counting down my top 10 Game Boy games. I was lucky enough to own a Game Boy not long after they were released, and from that moment on, I took it everywhere. Sure, I had my fair share of Tiger and Systema handhelds and a couple of Game & Watch games, but this was when it felt like true gaming on the go. So let's begin this countdown by taking a look at a classic from Konami. Released in 1990 by Konami, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fall of the Foot Clan was the first Turtles game released on the Game Boy. Players could choose their favourite turtle as they take on waves of foot soldiers with boss battles against the likes of Bebop and Rocksteady. What stood out to me was how well they captured the TMNT atmosphere despite the Game Boy's limitations. The controls were simple and responsive, and the levels were filled with classic Turtles action from its recognisable enemies to the soundtrack. While its sequels were technically more advanced, Fall of the Foot Clan remains the most memorable for me. Its simplicity and focus on action made it a game I loved returning to over and over. And who doesn't love a water stage in a Ninja Turtles game? Thankfully, there are no bombs to defuse in this one. The King of Fighters 95 is a standout example of how to deliver a quality 2D fighter on the Game Boy. Takara's expertise in adapting Neo Geo games for handheld systems was on full display here, capturing the fast-paced action of SNK's classic fighter in a portable format. The game featured a roster of iconic characters with responsive controls and visuals that, while scaled back, held up well on the Game Boy's display. The game does suffer from a lack of variety in background music, which is a bit of a disappointment given the series' usual high standard. This portable entry was followed up by a version of The King of Fighters 96, which is another fantastic adaptation, but for me, 95 just about has the edge. After the disappointments of Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat on the system, Takara demonstrated how a 2D fighter should be done on a portable system. Their SNK ports helped set the stage for the Neo Geo Pocket's fighting games, and King of Fighters 95 remains a standout in the Game Boy's library. In 1991, IREM brought their iconic arcade shoot-'em-up R-Type to the Game Boy. This adaptation stayed true to the arcade classic, with scaled-down versions of the level designs, huge bosses, and the pod power-up that the original was renowned for. While the Game Boy version was slower paced than the original, it still managed to retain the essence of what made R-Type so memorable. The visuals stood out, making excellent use of the Game Boy's limited display to ensure the action was always clear, even when the screen was filled with enemies. Despite the game's cutbacks, the gameplay remained as challenging and rewarding as ever. R-Type on the Game Boy was a fantastic example of how to convert an arcade classic to a handheld console. Released in 1991 by Tecmo and developed by Natsume, Ninja Gaiden Shadow brought the essence of the Ninja Gaiden series to the Game Boy. Interestingly, it began as a Game Boy adaptation of Shadow of the Ninja, before being reworked into a prequel to Ninja Gaiden. The gameplay delivers solid 2D platforming action, though it lacks the wall climbing mechanics of the NES games. The pace is slower, but Ryu's grappling hook adds a unique twist, allowing him to swing from specific points. While it doesn't match the speed or complexity of its console counterparts, Ninja Gaiden Shadow is a well-designed and enjoyable entry in the series. Released by Nintendo in 1994, Donkey Kong took the classic arcade formula and turned it into a full-fledged adventure with over 100 levels. Starting with the original arcade stages, it quickly opened up into creative, puzzle platforming levels. This game was one of the first to take advantage of the Super Game Boy, adding colour and enhanced graphics when played on the Super Nintendo. Donkey Kong was an impressive reimagining of the arcade classic and the perfect fit for Nintendo's handheld. Released in 1992, Super Mario Land 2 is one of the most iconic games for the system. In this adventure, Mario sets out to reclaim his castle from Wario, who makes his debut as the game's main villain. The game features an overworld map and 6 unique zones to explore, each packed with memorable enemies and challenges. The graphics were very impressive for the Game Boy, with large detailed sprites and gameplay that felt polished and responsive. With new power-ups and its memorable level design, Super Mario Land 2 delivered an unforgettable handheld Mario experience that I definitely still enjoy going back to. Released in 1991 by Konami, Operation C brought the classic Contra action to the Game Boy. It delivered all the run-and-gun action that we loved from the series, with intense boss fights and overhead sections that followed in Super Contra's footsteps. The controls were responsive and the challenge level was spot on, making it one of the best handheld run-and-gun games around at the time. Operation C captured everything I loved about the series, and it kept me coming back for more. My pick for number 3 is a game that's as iconic as the Game Boy itself, Super Mario Land. Released in 1989, this was Mario's first Game Boy adventure, and it quickly became a favourite of mine. The game takes you through the unique kingdoms of Sarasaland, each with its own distinct theme and enemies. One feature that really stood out was the shoot-'em-up stages, which added a fun twist to the typical platforming action. With its unforgettable music and fantastic stage design, Super Mario Land captured the magic of Mario and kept me glued to my Game Boy for hours at a time. My pick for number 2 is one that most Game Boy owners would have had, as it was a pack-in title. It is, of course, Tetris. Released in 1989, it's almost impossible to think about the Game Boy without hearing that memorable music playing in your head. I remember hours of trying to clear those falling blocks, challenging friends for the high score, and getting just one more line to keep the game going. Tetris on the Game Boy was a perfect fit, and this version helped turn it into one of the most influential games of all time. Released in 1990 by Technos Japan, Double Dragon brought the classic beat-em-up action to the Game Boy. This version struck a perfect balance between the NES and arcade versions, making it the obvious choice for my number 1. The graphics were adapted perfectly for the system, and it features a fantastic version of the original soundtrack. I remember spending countless hours and a small fortune in batteries playing through this classic over and over again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section and subscribe to the channel for more retro gaming content.